Okay, I will ask a question.
Thank you,
But
Sarah.
yeah, just want to say I really liked your presentation, point number one. But I just think, and maybe I'm going too far ahead because we're going to start kind of adding complexity probably. But one thing I struggle with just building models in general is obviously systems get kind of complicated if we continue adding things.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how do we know when to stop adding complexity is sometimes the question I do. Because
me too.
obviously and
Yep,
I'm a veterinarian dealing with
yep,
systems, production systems, and dealing with microbiologists and immunologists giving their
yep,
perspectives. And you need to add this, you cannot do this without this. And I guess at what point does additional detail
yep.
stop helping in understanding the actual question we're trying to answer? But yeah, it's
Right.
more a statement than I don't know if it's something we can answer.
Yeah. So thank you for emphasizing this point. And you may have noted my comment on one of the slides that while the models, the similarity between models and maps is more than skin deep. I did note that at the bottom of that slide um, that in my experience with models, it's often more challenging to know what to leave out, right? And partly that's a reflection of emergence. And like sometimes we representing has consequences that we don't fully understand at first, and so it's hard sometimes to say, okay, I think I'll leave out this because we don't fully grasp the implications. Um, so Plusson and Tilly um, in this book um,
Can you tell me
are
what's the title? Because I cannot really
sure.
see with the reflection.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's called
Sorry.
Realist Evaluation. Realistic
Realistic.
Evaluation by Pawson and Tilly. I'll see if I can type it in here. Um, uh, and by Pawson and Tilly. Um, they, I don't know if this particular remark will offer any value, but they use the analogy of a pontoon bridge. That when you're trying to cross the swamp and move beyond it, that um, you know that sometimes it's enough to cross a pontoon bridge. It's fit for purpose. It will get you across and get you to the other side. Uh, but avoid um, over engineering it for your purposes if it's a one-time traversal, right? Um, Now that may sound glib, and but the point is fitness for purpose, and um, I, it may be helpful to reflect here on the nature, like you did in your question, of the sort of the sociological nature of the modeling process. Like this doesn't occur in isolation. You're right. You have stakeholders of various sorts. You have different voices who say, like, I won't trust that unless you have this in there, right? Like this needs to be in there. Um, and that that is something that I think definitely needs to be weighed. For example, I've dealt with clinicians before who find it like using the stock and flow model for system dynamics, uh, where I might have used one of those. They say like, I don't really know what that means. I have trouble thinking about a stock of patients in a certain condition, and they're much more familiar with like dealing with patients as individuals, and so they want to see a model that has individuals. I've seen other cases, um, again trying to capture somewhat the balanced nature of this, um, the reality and practice that like people, and you could argue whether this is as it should be or not, where the light bulbs turn on in their heads like once they see agents like circulating in some space, particularly geography. They say like, oh, that's something I recognize. Um And somehow it lends greater sense of buy-in. Whether it should or not is a little bit of like that starts to sound a little bit judgmental, a little bit um technocratic, maybe like, well, they should up their understanding. I think the fact is we work in a human theater, and like stakeholder confidence, stakeholder buy-in, stakeholder um conviction that this is sensible, like it does matter. I will say that emphasizing on my side, I do like to emphasize the iterative nature of this. This is extraordinarily important, and it's the subject of other lectures. But it was hinted at by that sort of figure of the iterative nature of the modeling process. There's these iterations. Like, this is not a matter of like, okay, we're going to build the world's biggest model, the model to rule them all. And, 3 years from now, we're going to have it. Maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 5 years, like you don't want to set up the expectations that like nothing is good until you get something. Because here's the deal. You undercut profoundly the learning process if you do this. And the point is that along the way, you often learn much better what needs to be in the model. And the stakeholders often are much clearer about what a model is and start to actually sharpen their understanding. And often the model starts bringing out tacit understanding that isn't otherwise on the table. Like they didn't think to mention, yeah, that's right. I've never mentioned it, but this, and like observations about the system or so on. And so like starting the process often brings them along much more effectively than trying to have like, one or two meetings where you like set the scope for the model to be delivered over the next few years. It's really you bring them along, you show them things along the way. That develops their understanding about modeling, but it also elicits more understanding from them. It builds their thinking about the system, refines their thinking, and often it helps, in my experience, across many modeling projects, bring out the pragmatic nature of modeling. Like, okay, what do we add next? Like, what's the next priority here, right? We can only go so fast, one step at a time. What's the next thing to add? And that starts to face them with the reality that like we're learning along the way. We're choosing to add things along the way, and it's not a matter of like we need the full crystal ball or we don't have anything. It's a matter of like, trying things, learning from it, whether it's through sensitivity analysis or seeing the implied dynamics or having those discussions, showing them this as it runs. And often that ends up transforming the social environment, like transforming those discussions, transforming it from like, I'm not going to settle for it unless it has all these things, to more like they're part of the process. And often it changes them in ways that makes them much more open to pragmatism and sort of trying things out and publishing along the way and using um, using the learning that's gone on to refine their understanding, and again bringing out their tacit knowledge, the things they never thought to mention before. So I that would be my strong advice, to approach it very much in an incremental, iterative, learn as you go. The fact is, maybe you'll get to that bigger, better model. Maybe you'll get to that wonderful model in the sky that you would aspire to after 4 or 5 years. But it'll be a much more savvy model because you will have learned along the way. You will have the process of doing that will make you much more savvy as a modeler as to why things are in there. And the fact is, if you build the bigger, better model all at once and you deploy it, you're going to have a devil of a time learning from it, because like, why is this? What's causing this? Well, it could be any of these zillions of things. If you're adding things bit by bit, and again, I've pulled lectures on this, but bit by bit, experiment, trying, running it, seeing it. You know it's incomplete. It's not close to what they want yet, but you're adding things bit by bit. you're simulating it, you see what the results are, then you start to connect like certain behaviors with certain things you've added one at a time, and you start to become savvy for what's causing them. More than that, if you end up with some bug, something where there was a silly thing done, you discover it much, much more quickly, right? And you see this wild behavior, say, is that some interesting emergence, or is that a bug? Or is that, some design, like we didn't take into account this, of course we shouldn't do this. And you learn from that vastly faster than if you've added a whole swack of stuff at once. So learning as you go transforms the social environment of modeling. It often transforms the discussions. It brings out new understanding. It makes people more better understand where they're going and what this model is about, what modeling is about. But it also helps you learn much, much, much more effectively from the modeling. So when you get to add more things in, you've chosen them more judiciously on the basis of understanding built up. And often you end up publishing along the way because you've got something interesting enough in the first few iterations. You end up saying, well, look, for this paper, um, that will be sufficient, and you end up putting that into a manuscript form. I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Yeah,
yeah,
I do like to think dynamic models, as you said, as like the dynamic hypothesis, because obviously we might even argue that there's no perfect model because
exactly.
systems probably evolve. But yeah,
Exactly. By the time you build it, it's changed, right? Uh,
exactly.
or
Thank you.
the intervention that it shapes may further bring to light new types of data to inform it, or will require some additional structure or what have you. Yeah, I'm glad if that's useful. And again, this is the purpose of the boot camp, to bring these things out. We'll have many opportunities in coming days. This is very, very foundational material. Other things people want to bring forward. Okay, well, maybe ideas will spring over lunch. So I'd like to suggest we meet back in about an hour. I guess it's 55 minutes now. So at at half past the coming hour, whatever that is in your time zone. Okay. Thanks very much. We'll see you then. Take care. I'm going to close this so that we start to get the videos recorded, and that will allow me to post them sooner to YouTube. Thanks. We'll be back online at 1:30. Take care.